Hey everyone, Sirturmund here again. And today we're gonna do something special. So OP07 officially released yesterday on Friday. Again, I hope that you all had great luck with your pack openings and your box openings. I'm still looking for 2 boxes myself, so we'll see if we find some this weekend so that I can do a box opening video for you guys. But today, now that we finished our showcase of all OP07 leaders, so the new ones, I wanted to do an OP06 tier list. Now, we have done this a couple times in our channel already. We did this 3 months ago for OP06. So some of you might be familiar with how I do this. I break down into 5 categories, right? So S is my meta defining decks. What I think are the decks that you're gonna see winning the most tournaments, right? So these are the decks that are consistently you have them represented in top 8. You have them actually winning your regionals, your treasure cups. Then we have A tier, where it's just decks that end up finishing top 32, top 64 if you have a 1,000 player tournament, right? Like these event toppers, you usually see like 2 or 3 of those in one of those top 64, top 32. Then you have C decks, which are like competitive, but like, yeah, they're gonna give you some wins in a regional, but it's not gonna be like anything crazy. But you could probably win like a locals with them. D, just decks that you have a locals, and then F, decks that are just so bad that I don't even recommend you bringing them for locals unless you're like a really big fan of that deck, etc. Right? So we are gonna go through every leader in the game. I always like to do this to kind of see where we are with the old leaders versus the new leaders, etc. But because we are talking about OP07, we're gonna start with the new OP07 leaders, right? And I'm gonna just move them all right here for now, just so that it's easier for us to just move them around and we're not just bringing back. So OP07 introduces 6 new leaders. All of them are monocolor leaders, so not dual color leaders. And these are the 6 leaders that you see down here: Dragon, Bonnie, Foxy, Vegapunk, Lucy, and Boa. All of those, which again over the last 3-4 weeks we have been showcasing our channel, so make sure to check out those videos to kind of get an idea of how to play each of these decks. Unfortunately for OP07, really, I mean, you kind of have like, for this OP07 leaders, you kind of have like a very clear top half and very clear bottom half, right? So if we look at this, I do think Lucy is going to be a meta defining deck, right? So Black still is pretty strong, even with Sakasuki. And Lucy is really nice because he has a decent matchup against Red Purple Law with the stage, but he also just still gets to play ACOS Moria, still gets to do their thing. They have new tools with the ACOS Sabo as well. You can feel the trash very easily, and you have the Tempest Kick, which is pretty much taking the place of Great Eruption, right? So it ends up being really, really nice here. So I do think you're going to see a lot of Lucy decks in OP07 winning tournaments or finishing top 8. Because it's just up there, right? And Lucy by far is probably your best leader in OP07 because of that reason. Of the OP07 leaders, at least, right? On the A tier, on the event toppers, out of these new leaders, I honestly only feel comfortable putting Bonnie here. Now, this might be a little bit controversial that I'm not having Boa up here, but we also will touch a little bit with Boa in a second. I do think Bonnie is really good, right? Bonnie has a lot of great matchups into the meta. She can do really well, right? Being able to rest the opponent's characters every turn, etc. I think she's going to top events. She's going to top event. It just feels like she's lacking just a tiny little thing, right? She's just lacking something. She's lacking something to make her consistent enough, in my opinion, to just actually be straight up winning tournaments. So that is why I kind of feel like she might win 1 or 2 here, but for the most part, you're probably going to see her more like into this top 16s, top 32s, right? And not really making it like 9-1 or 10-0. As you have a lot of these Switch tournaments that are. So I put Bonnie on this A tier here, and Boa, some people have put her on A tier. I actually think she's a lot weaker than I thought, right? I actually prefer some of the other blue leaders over Boa. The amount of support that we have with Boa, like all these 7 of the Wild Road characters and stuff, is really good. But it just feels like Boa is still lacking something. It feels like she's still also lacking something to kind of bring her to this A and S tier here. I feel like she does have decent matchup against like Red Purple Law as well, but I feel like a lot of other decks can just kind of eat her alive, and that's the problem that you have with Boa. Like, she's going to not have a great matchup against Black, and that's why I think she just lands into the competitive side of things. Now, the funny thing about the remaining 3 leaders is I actually think all 3 of these leaders fall into this D category. They're not actually bad. Like, I mean, they're not great, but they're not like completely trash that you should never play them. And honestly, I'm even debating whether Dragon can actually go into the C tier, because I do think that there's some room for Dragon to shine. It can just be pretty tough, right? But I am actually a little bit high on Dragon compared to the other ones. But I think until I see some Dragon results, I think it's probably best to just leave it as D tier. But Dragon, Vegapunk, and Thoughtseize, they're all very interesting leaders that have very unique leader abilities. And because of that, they can actually do very well against like random off-meta jank. They can steal games over some of the top decks as well, as you saw in the videos that we showcased of Dragon, Thoughtseize, and Vegapunk. But they're all kind of just missing that last key that really makes them, I guess, that makes them powerful enough to push into this A and C tier, to be honest. Like Dragon, I think Dragon, in my opinion, has the most potential just with the cards that we had in OP07, because this red aggression can be really surprising if you're not prepared for it. And if Dragon gets enough of the A-cost dragons in the field and they're just consistently putting this pressure on you, you could potentially just die, because then they can set up for like a rush Luffy, right? With Vegapunk and Thoughtseize, if you know what you have to do against these leaders, you can play around them. Like, you can actually play around them and stop them from just getting as much value as they get from the leader ability. While with Dragon, even if you know how to play around Dragon, you can still get completely punished with just how fast this deck can go. So this is how we rank the OP07 leaders. I don't think any of them are completely unplayable. I think, again, all of them can at least be played at like a locals level and potentially win you a locals or two, right? So I wouldn't say that you should not play them. It's just that just be prepared that you're gonna struggle or you're gonna have a tougher matchups against some of these top decks that you see up here, right? So that's where I rank the OP07 leaders after play testing with them. So let's just quickly go through the rest of the leaders here, and I'm just gonna go in order here from OP01, moving all the way to the starter decks in the bottom, right? So yeah, let's see how that goes for us here in the next 15 to 20 minutes. So let's go ahead and move to the rest of the leaders. And again, I'm gonna move through this pretty quickly because One Piece now has a lot of leaders, to be honest, right? So there's a lot of leaders here that we kind of have to go through as quick as possible, so that we're not here sitting here for like an hour, right? I think Zoro is actually decent, to be honest. I think I would put Zoro. Do we put it at the same tier as Dragon, or is it actually enough to be competitive? I think Zoro could actually be pretty competitive because of some of the tools that you get. Like again, A-cost Dragon can also be really good for Zoro. And you just get to put a lot of aggression. If opponents are not prepared to deal with Zoro, you can just put a lot of value into it. So I always feel like Zoro can potentially steal games if people are not prepared to deal with Zoro. I always been a fan of Zoro just kind of being like this hidden, underrated deck. So I think I like putting him right here. At the same time, though, I don't know that Red Green Law. I don't know that it's a list. I think it's still competitive as well. I think I still put Red Green Law over this D leaders just because Cavendish helped us out a lot, right? Cavendish is really good for this leader, gets us a lot of value. So you can still find Red Green Law in kind of like this competitive cup of tier, like kind of middle of the pack in my opinion. Luffy just goes to F. So does Odin, unfortunately. I think these two decks are just way too weak for what we potentially do in the meta, right? Now, this is going to be crazy. I actually like the Flamingo, so the blue OP01 the Flamingo, better than I like the Boa. Maybe I'm getting too influenced by Twitter and by other content creators, but I think this Doflamingo has a lot of potential compared to Boa, just being able to feel the board and kind of still doing a lot of the same things that Boa does. So I actually think you're going to see some rogue Doflamingo decks being able to top events and actually do really well here. Kaido, unfortunately, purple blue Kaido goes for F. Same thing with Croc. Same thing with Kin. I like the Whitebeard at D. Now, I like Zoro over Whitebeard because I think that Whitebeard continues to just not get enough support to actually make him viable enough, in my opinion. Like he's still the same deck that he was from the last like 3 sets. while other decks continue getting more and more tools to be able to handle the Whitebeard and just stall him out and just wait for him to be a 0 life and then just have some big attacks, right? So I think the Whitebeard is going to struggle competing with a lot of these decks, especially as we talk about like Black Yellow Luffy later on, etc. You have people like Lucy or Mori just completely removing the Whitebeard cards. So I think it's going to be kind of tough for Whitebeard to really find itself anywhere to like really find the room to like do what it needs to do, right? So I think that's why I like the Whitebeard at the D tier. Garp is actually decent in my opinion. He's not as bad as some of these F tier leaders because you just have access to black and red cards. Kinemon, unfortunately, is just not the time for Kinemon anymore, so I think he's F. Same thing with Sanji. Ivankov, I like it as a D. Ivankov actually, with a lot of the blue support that we got, can also do really well. But I think he's still a little bit weaker than the Boa and the Flamingo that we have here on this A and C tier, right? Magellan can still... actually, you know what? Like, Magellan can still do stuff, I guess, right? Like, Magellan can still be okay, I guess. It feels bad. I feel like Magellan is just too slow. At this point, I'd rather play Hannibal over Magellan, to be honest. And Hannibal is not even that good, right? So I think Magellan is just going to be an F tier here. I don't think he's good enough to stay competitive to some of these decks here that we have over here. I'm going to just leave the OP07 leaders kind of like more in the front. C is not just his time yet, but with Black Maria net set, C could potentially do well. I like Smoker as a D tier. I think he has potential. Again, just have access to some of these black cards. His effect can still be really good here, so I like that here. Ace, I think, is also in that same level of Whitebeard Dragon, where it's a decent red deck that can potentially steal some games, but not enough, I mean, in my opinion, to get to that competitive or a Ben Toppers type of tier. Kuru goes to F, and Arlon goes to D, because Arlon can actually be very surprising, right? It can be very surprising if people are not prepared to deal with Arlon and just pushing all this pressure into the opponent. Then we hit Nami, and Nami, I think, is going to be not a really surprising pick, right? Nami always kind of is like a fringe option, but it's like a Takla, right? Like this, the way that I do my tier list is not like, oh, this deck is like S tier or A tier. It's more like, do I expect to see this deck topping events? And I always gonna expect like 2 or 3 Namis in the top 64, top 32 almost every single time, right? Like Nami is like that cockroach that just never goes away, and I still expect Nami to do exactly that. So I'm expecting Nami to still be in that Ben Topper category, and then you're gonna see her a lot, especially some of these new builds that I'm seeing using some of the new cards from OP07. Iceberg honestly goes to D tier. He's not as bad as he used to be. With the release of EVO1, he's actually very cool. Can actually put some pressure and surprise people if they're not ready for it. Lucy here, I mean, Lucy technically can go on D. I don't see a reason why you would ever play this OPO3, I think it is, or is it OPO4? I think it's one of those two. I don't see a reason why you're ever going to play this Lucy, or we're just playing the OPO7 Lucy. But hey, if you wanted to do that, it's still decent enough because you have access again to all these black cards, and you can just build it with a CP package that you can still potentially do well against like the worst decks in the game, right? Black Yellow Big Mom, I think, is pretty bad, unfortunately. She just doesn't have enough to really make it anywhere here. I just realized that my camera is like blocking some of these leaders that I keep putting because my camera's on the right side. But anyways, yeah, the Black Yellow Big Mom, I think, is just not good enough to make it. So I think she just goes straight to F. Katakuri is still a menace. So I think Katakuri, even though he's weaker than what he was in OP06, and honestly, since EVO1, we really haven't seen Katakuri that much, but I still think he has the potential to sneak in here and be able to steal some wins against some of these black decks, especially. Obviously, he has a very bad matchup against Red Purple Law, but he can still do very well because 10 cost Big Mom is still 10 cost Big Mom. I'm actually high on BB. I think BB is not the worst deck out there either. So she could potentially be here in this D tier, which she can do really well against some certain things. Like she can surprise people when they least expect it. So I think BB can land right here. There's a couple lists that I've been looking at for BB that I'm excited to try out for the channel sometime in the next month or so. Green Purple Doflamingo, I think, is in the competitive tier just because you can build this list in such a way to like really beat the red purple law players with the birdcage and potentially do well against some of these other decks that rely on like kind of swarming the board, right? And then just kind of stall out for your Dolphy, etc. And you get some new tools from green as well that you can use there. So I think that ends up being here on the C tier. Fujitora, unfortunately, is strictly for fun deck. Unfortunately, this leader is probably one of the worst leaders in the game. Like, you're not really doing a lot with his leader ability as much as he sucks, right? As much as he sucks for such a cool character to be relegated to F, right? But I mean, F tier is full of very cool characters that we wish had better leader abilities. My screen is getting bigger and bigger. Maybe I zoom out a little bit here. Yeah, let's just zoom out a little bit here so that we can actually continue selecting the things here. Then we go for Rebecca. Rebecca is interesting. I actually think Rebecca could be competitive. And again, maybe I'm getting too influenced by Cross here, but this combination of blue and black is still very strong. It's a lot weaker than not having Sakasuki, of course, but it's still going to be very, very fun. Very, very strong if you build it the right way. So I don't think she's going to be like completely broken. But I think there's a list out there with Rebecca that's going to surprise people just because of how competitive she can actually be. So I think this is a good position for Rebecca here, just in that competitive tier, which she can potentially steal games, especially if opponents are not prepared for it. Queen is also another one that could potentially go into C, to be honest, but I think I'm gonna leave her at D just because it can be really bad. It's worse than Katakuri when it comes to like that red purple law matchup or the like really aggressive matchup. So I think Queen has to be kind of like in this D tier, but kind of like Rebecca, it could potentially jump to C tier depending on how the list ends up being built out. I'm actually very high on Purple Yellow Crocodile. I think he's into the C tier here, where, again, the new support that we got from EBO1 allows him to just be able to actually compete with some of these decks in the meta and be able to kind of starve out people because you have all this heal with the A-Cast Crocodile, with the Yamato, etc. You could even play Ace, right, if you wanted to now in this list as well. And the Okama way is just so crazy, right? So the cool part here, again, is the fact that your leader ability allows you to play the Tank-Cast Ace on turn 10. And if you really have an A-Cast Crocodile on the field, it means that when your opponent attacks, you use your leader ability, you use your A-Cast Crocodile and then your leader ability, and you have an active down, and then you can use for the Okana way. So even though you're tapping out completely of the 10 down with your ace, you're still able to do things with this Crocodile. So I think he can really be here in the C tier and be very competitive against some of the decks that you might see. The more that I look at the decks that I've been putting on the C tier, by the way, I think I am going to make a change and put this Dragon up here. I think I'm going to put Dragon at the same level of Sorrow about the aggressiveness that he can put in. So again, I'm very high on Dragon. Some people might not be, but I think if you're not prepared to deal with this aggression, you could get very surprised really quickly. We have Red, Black, and Sabo, which I think can easily go into D tier. Bello Betty also goes in D tier. Decks that are not completely unplayable, but unfortunately just not consistent enough. I'm also going to put Rocinante on the D tier. I think he's better than some of these F tier leaders, even if you don't see a lot of Rocinantes, unfortunately. So, yeah, I think I'm excited to try out and see what that list looks like, especially with a lot of the tools that we got from both green and blue this set. Sakasuki obviously is F. You can't even play him. Luffy. So Purple Luffy is interesting here, right? Purple Luffy, I think, just unfortunately is a set too early. It's a set too early. He could be better, but just not at this moment. Just not at this moment. So I think Luffy is still D here, but in the next couple of sets where we start getting some supports, more purple cards, right? Luffy could potentially jump. This Luffy has always been super scary, and I think in the future could potentially make it back to his glory days during OP05. And now we finally get to another one of our meta-defining decks, and that's going to be Enel, right? I think there's no surprise for people that Enel is going to be up here. Enel, in combination with Red Purple Law, could potentially be the two best decks of the format. I do still put Lushi pretty high up there as well, but Enel, with the new tools that he has, and obviously the Tank-Cast Ace, is really a big annoyance for a lot of these decks, and it's the reason why you have a lot of these red decks like not able to really get to that A or S tier because they just get so punished by Enel and just the heal that you get from Enel. It's just kind of putting this whole color on the back burner as long as Enel is around the field. Red Purple Uta, I think she's actually D. She's not as bad. Same thing with Hody Jones. Like these two dealers can again be very surprising if people are not prepared to deal with them. So I think you have them there. You have them there. They can be really good. Very surprising if the people are not ready for it. There we go for Perona. And I think Perona is going to be a deck that's going to surprise a lot of people and top a lot of events. Because this new package with the One Country package is actually really, really good and really solid for Perona, allowing you to just get a ton of value. So I think I'm very high on Perona and putting her right here on the A tier with this other meta, I guess, event topping type of decks. Yamato is an interesting one because I think Yamato is really good, but I feel like Yamato has become really easy for people to actually play around and actually counter. Now I don't feel comfortable enough to put Yamato in A. I think I'm gonna put Yamato in C because I feel like a lot of these other green decks, like your Bonnie and your Perona, are actually a lot better than Yamato, right? And same thing with the yellow decks, and Nell and Kakuri can be better like Yamato. Obviously, Yamato does a completely different thing than those decks can, but I think it's just a little bit weaker than some of the things that we're seeing here on the A tier. Ryu, unfortunately, gets eaten alive by Law, so I think you only want to play this like in a for fun locals scenario. She does really well against a lot of other things in the meta, but it's just that Law matchup that makes it really hard to imagine her topping any events or really feeling like a competitive deck. Moria, I'm putting on the same level as Lucy. I think Moria and Lucy are going to be that dual threat of black leaders in this meta. And Moria is still really, really good, right? A lot of people debate whether Lucy or Moria is better. I think they're really very close in level. So I think I still want to put this deck here as meta defining because, again, these are the decks that I expect to be winning a lot of events. I'm actually going to do something crazy here and put the red-green Odin into the competitive tier. I think it's actually super underrated, this deck. Could potentially do really well into this meta and as the meta shakes out. So I actually do like Odin here. I'm excited to revisit him. We had Odin top an event last week. Granted, it was like the EBO 1.5 meta, but I think, again, Odin is a really unexplored leader that people are just not giving enough credit. I think Hannibal, with his ramp, can actually fall in D. He's better than Magellan for sure, so I think I like him here. Same thing with Kyros. Kyros can fall into D just because you still have access to all these black cards that can give you a lot of value. Uta goes all the way in the bottom. No need to say anything else about that red Uta, unfortunately. This blue Luffy is actually very close to being C tier, sorry. This Luffy can actually be really crazy as well. But I think it is a little bit weaker than Boa, so that's why I think I want to put it at D tier. We have the new Sakazuki, and the new Sakazuki, I think, is D tier. Again, the combination of black and blue is really strong, but I actually think Rebecca is going to be slightly better than Sakazuki because the Sakazuki leader ability is just really, it's a really, really big downside having to discard a card, which kind of makes it fall him into D tier. Red Luffy is also going to be D tier, just aggressive decks, kind of similar to Ace. Kid, I think, is also D tier, not worse than the F tier decks, but also not as good as these competitive decks. Crocodile, I think, is also D tier, just slightly worse than your Boas, kind of like at the same level as the Bankov, in my opinion. Purple Kaido is going to be D tier as well, but don't worry, because Purple Kaido next set with OPOA and Black Maria is going to be kind of crazy. So he's going to get slightly there. Purple Shanks, just F tier. Black Sakazuki, F tier. This Big Mom, the starter deck Big Mom, I think she's actually D tier. I think I like her better than the black and yellow Big Mom. So I think I have a list that I want to try out with Big Mom in my head, and I think she actually could potentially be very good in like a locals type of setting. Black Luffy can still go in D tier just because of the access to black, but Yellow Yamato I think is a little bit worse. I think I will put Yamato all the way in F, and then we have our other meta-defining deck, and the last one of our big top four, which is Red Purple Law. And there's no question for everybody that Red Purple Law is probably one of the best decks in the format. So yeah, I mean, Red Purple Law is here. These are the four decks, again, that I expect to be the top of the meta and winning almost every event. Red Purple Law, Yellow NL, and the two black decks here with Mora and Lucy. If you're looking to just win tournaments, these are the four decks that you should be looking at first, either to play or to beat them. And not to say that these decks are also not good choices, but these are probably going to be your most consistent that are going to be making up the bulk of your top 16s, top 8, and your top 4 tables. Red Purple Luffy is actually, I think, decent. He's in the competitive tier. He's not as bad as some of the other decks in the D tier. Unfortunately for the Kid, though, I think the Kid is honestly really, really bad. Like, maybe Kid can be better than some of these leaders, but I don't respect the Red Purple Kid from starter deck. Uta, I think, is going to be on the competitive tier. She can be decent, but I don't think she's consistent enough to be topping some of these events. We have the green blue Zoro, and this is a hard one for me because there's some lists out there that could actually make this deck be really crazy. I'm excited to revisit the Zoro Sanji, but I think it's actually a really good deck, and that's why I'm gonna put it in the C tier here compared to just bringing it down to D. Then we have Red Yellow Sabo, and Red Yellow Sabo, in my opinion, can also fall into competitive tier. This is kind of crazy, but I think there's some lists with Red Yellow Sabo that people are just not trying this deck enough, and I think this deck can actually be super aggressive and just put enough pressure to bring it up there into this level. And then we have Ace, which I think is a little bit weaker than the Sabo, so I'm gonna put it at D. And then we have Luffy, which obviously is gonna be one of our event toppers, with Luffy being one of these decks that you are seeing a lot in a lot of these tournaments, right? I think it's just a little bit weaker though than some of these decks up here. But obviously the benefit that Luffy has is that it can do really well against black leaders, right? So that's the benefit that this has, that it's a really good counter into this. But I think it does a little bit worse against some of these other, like the Red Purple Law. It kind of does not, I mean, it does better into the bounty now that they're playing stuff like the Tenka's Kusan, but it can still be a tough matchup, right? So I think I do like Luffy here. He's not meta defining, but I think you're gonna see him topping a lot of tournaments over this set, right? So I spoke a lot, I rambled a lot. I was trying to make this less than 30 minutes, so that's why I was rushing to some of these decisions. But this is my tier list here, right? And again, we're not gonna talk much about the F tiers or the D tiers deck, but these first tiers here are what I expect for you to see in most of your regionals and most of your treasure cups, right? Especially these two tiers up here, you're probably gonna still have a lot of Yamatos and a lot of Boas that are gonna show up, especially with Boa being like the new kid on the block, right? But this, I want to say right there, these 10 decks up here are what you're gonna see very often, in my opinion. Again, the Dolphy and the Boa are probably gonna swap because people are gonna play Boa more, but I actually do think Dolphy is slightly better. I do think Dolphy is probably the worst of these A tier decks. Wow, Boa and Yamato are probably the best of the C tier decks, but again, I'm just very high on this. So, in overall, for this meta, be prepared to play against this four decks. They're gonna define your whole meta, and these decks are gonna come up as well to try to counter these decks, which means that you're gonna be looking to play into these decks a lot. I'm personally gonna be playing Red Purple Law, and that's just because I had already built Red Purple Law for EBO1. And I don't wanna have to spend money buying the rest of the cards that I need to build these other decks. So I'm just, unless I pull like all the SRs that I need for Lucy, I'm probably just gonna get Red Purple Law, right? Unless I pull like, unless I get like the secret aces, I'm probably just gonna get Red Purple Law, because I just don't want to spend the money. And Red Purple Law is also gonna be like a top tier deck in OPOA. So for me, it makes sense to just play it in OPO7 and also play it in OPOA until Banda decides to ban it. So that's my thought here. But again, any of these decks are really good. And now that we have finished showcasing all the new OPO7 leaders, I'm gonna start covering a lot of these decks here. So going more meta, but I'm also gonna be sprinkling in some of these off meta leaders as well. So don't think I'm just gonna be doing just meta slave stuff, right? So I think tomorrow's video, unless I find boxes today, tomorrow's video is probably actually going to be on Red Purple Law for OPO7. So yeah, but anyways, that's my thought with this tier list for OPO7. I hope you enjoyed this discussion. Let me know what you think, your thoughts below. And again, I'm very excited to kind of showcase some of this list that I'm cooking for stuff like Zoro Sanji, stuff like Rebecca. And obviously, I'm super excited to play Perona again with the Wano package. That deck looks like a blast. So I actually have a good time in this set. I think this set, more than anything, this set is very variety, right? Last meta for OPO6, we knew Sakazuki was the best deck in the format. Like Sakazuki was up here, tier like close to tier 0, right? now you kind of have like a very healthy mix of four decks that you can play. Really 5-6 here, because again, you're going to see a lot of Bunny and a lot of Luffy. And then you have some other decks here that you can play. So you're going to have a really healthy meta split, in my opinion. And I think that's just going to make OP07 meta better than what we saw in OP06. But anyways, yeah, that's going to be it for us for today. I hope that you enjoyed today's tier list. If you like today's video, make sure to like it below and subscribe to us. We post One Piece videos every single day. You can also find us on Twitch at Sirturmund with Shane now and then, and you can also find us on Discord and Twitter. The links to those above in the description below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all again tomorrow.